Welcome to Better Leaders, the podcast, where we surface good leadership and smart management in media and beyond. Today, I'm talking to Graciela Mochkofsky, Dean at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY. My name is Anita Zilina, and I'm your host. Welcome to Better Leaders. Graciela, welcome to Better Leaders, the podcast. I'm so thrilled that you could join me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it is wonderful that you're here, and you started your role as Dean at the Newmark J-School. How long ago?
8 months.
8 months. So we can talk about, it's not the 90-day conversation. It's basically the 8-month conversation, but maybe we can just dive right in with that as a start for our conversation. How did you approach that new role? Because it is a big role. It is a new role for you, even though you've been in academia for a while. How did you strategically kind of start that new leadership role?
So thank you for the question. So I've been at the school for 7 years, and I had a smaller leadership role at the school. Before, I was running the bilingual program first and then the Center for Community Media. But this job is, of course, much bigger, and it requires a different type of strategic approach and understanding of the community. So I did what I always do with everything, professional in my life, which is I over-prepare. And I spent, it took a long time to get this job. It was a 10-month process from the moment I applied till I got it. So I used that time to do a very intense listening tour. I met with faculty members, staff members, alumni, students. I was the chair of the strategic planning committee, as you know, at the school. So I used that also to, I had been thinking about the school in a strategic way, but I used that also to think about, okay, what is my strategic vision for the school? I knew some of this is a healthy school. It's a healthy place. So my job, my first approach, or the first thing I thought was, okay, so this is not a broken place that I need to fix. There's a lot of things that are great and that work. So I don't need to change those. But there are things that I've been, as part of the community that I think need change. And also I had a very different personality and kind of leadership style from the deans that preceded me. And so I wanted to bring that change. We were also at the end, I guess, whatever it is, of the pandemic, at a different time of the pandemic. So the school had gone through, very, like every institution in the world, a very rough time. And people were coming back into the office, and students were very happy to be back in person. So I thought also there would be some community rebuilding that was needed, just to bring people together and get them to feel part of the community again. And so I listened, I prepared. I knew exactly what I was doing when I started. I sat down in the first 6 months. I made sure I made time to sit down and have one-on-ones with almost everyone at the school, so that they would have the chance to kind of approach me in my different role. That was very helpful and interesting, because people would tell me different things than they did before when I was a colleague. It gave me a different, I thought I knew the place, but I realized that there was so much that I didn't. My husband says that you see everything from the top, that you have a window into process or lack of, and systems and people's behavior and expectations and dreams and frustrations that you didn't have before. So that was very interesting, and it did change my view on many things.
Interesting.
I did also realize why some things were done in certain ways when I thought, they made no sense to me from outside. Yeah. And then I realized, this is why. And so I would, that's kind of a general answer to your question. Sorry.
That's a very thoughtful, and it doesn't surprise me that you give a very thoughtful answer to that, because, and for our listeners, we've been colleagues at the school and our friends and interacted in professionally in the past 5 years or so. And I've always encountered you as someone who's very prepared and thoughtful in how you go into meetings, conversations, but also big tasks. Now, you said something that I found, or your husband said something you said that I found very true and interesting, that you get to see everything from the top. And I do agree. But on the other hand, sometimes it gets quite, how should I say? It does get a little bit lonely at the top, because people stop telling you things and people stop seeing you as a peer and start seeing you as, oh, Graciela, the dean. I cannot, tell her that anymore because she's in a different role now. Did you experience that, or are you experiencing any of that?
So a few things. First, thank you for your words. And I do over prepare because I'm a woman. I don't know that I have and I'm an immigrant and I'm a Latina. So I don't know that I have a choice. And I think a lot of women who are leaders, and now I know a lot of women who are in leadership positions, and they all feel the same. Like, we don't have the privilege to not over prepare. So I'm fine. I don't mind it. I love over preparing, but just that comment. And then, I'm fighting against that phenomena that you described. Yeah. I am actually now I try to stay close to people. You get really busy. I mean, my calendar is ridiculous. And the first semester was particularly hard in the sense that I did not have the support that I needed to run the school, because I didn't have a leadership team. So the management team had, people had left during the pandemic, and my predecessor was wonderful in not filling those positions and leaving those vacancies for me to fill. And so,
but it takes some time, right?
It took some time. Yeah. It took, for CUNY times, I've done it in like lightning speed time, like in 7 months, I had a new full amazing leadership team. So I don't feel lonely now because I have incredible people. It was quite lonely the first few months. I did have a coach, which is something you recommended at some point, and that actually the chancellor, the head of the university, the president of the university, offered to all of the new deans. And I took that offer, and I'm very glad that I did. So I have this fantastic woman who meets with me once an hour a week, where I can, just talk about these things. And when I was feeling really lonely, Shirley is her name, she was there to support me. So I felt less lonely. And I did create, one of my priorities was to create infrastructure for things at the school. And one of the needed infrastructures was for my leadership and for my, deanship. So I don't feel lonely anymore. And it makes me, very happy. Now I come back home and my husband says, now you're smiling when you come home. Apparently the first 6 months I was like, just, like this dark cloud. Because I did feel the weight and it's a huge responsibility, and you don't want to make mistakes, right? Yeah. And I felt like I didn't want things to fall through the cracks. And so,
of course,
it was, but there's just, a limited number of hours in the day. And I have a small child, a young child, and I have a family, and I believe in the separation of work and life and private life. And so, that is something that I've encouraged everyone in the school to make sure they know that, weekends are, unless there's something pressing happening, weekends are for rest and be with family and friends and to do whatever it is that is not work. And, I leave at 5, I come home, I need to do dinner. And, I try not to neglect my personal life and family life. And I'm hoping people do the same. So, but, it was lonely for a while, and then now, and then it's not. It is, I guess it is, and it will always be lonely in the sense that the ultimate decision maker, particularly when decisions are hard, is you.
Is you.
And sometimes those decisions are, they are the ones you need to make, and they're needed, and it's in the best interest of the school, but it might hurt some people, and there are some hard decisions, and that, then you do feel lonely.
Yeah.
But I just tell myself, this is the job.
Yeah. A friend of mine who also was a former boss of mine in another management role, who was the CEO, used to say, well, listen, there is an easy way to describe what the CEO or the biggest boss of an organization is you're basically just a decision machine, right?
Right.
You're like every day consists of hundreds and hundreds of small to gigantic decisions that you basically have to make in the best interest of the company, sometimes with hard decisions, sometimes, with people not liking your decisions, sometimes with people with, decisions that might be painful at the moment, but are needed for the long term, like viability and sustainability of the organization. How hard was that to kind of get into that mode? Because it was slightly different to your leadership role before that, and also the roles you had before you even came to academia, right?
Yeah. So, I see myself not as a decision-making machine, but a problem-solving machine.
Yeah.
I feel like, that's one of kind of the first realizations soon after I studied. Oh, this job is about just solving problems. And I love solving problems. And so I thought I need to wake up every morning and have this very positive attitude towards problems and say, just bring them my way, just give me your problems, throw them. I'll give you a solution, if I can, or we'll figure it out. So thinking like that has been very helpful.
Yeah.
For me, because then you don't get overwhelmed. You're like, okay, next problem, next problem, next problem.
Absolutely.
And I realize also that and this is something that I'm correcting and I'm learning, and I second guess myself all the time. I feel it's important to just stop, at the end of the week and say, okay, wait, is this the way I should be doing this? Is there a better way to do this? I mean, do I need to do damage control here because I wasn't thoughtful, because you are, as a reporter, as a journalist, I'm used to making decisions to offer these solutions very quickly.
Yeah.
And what I've learned about myself is that I do that kind of automatically. And sometimes the solution and the decision needed more time.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to now say, okay, is this urgent? Do I really need to solve this now? Or can this wait? Because then I will have the space.
Yeah.
Because, what we all in these jobs seem to know, now that I know more people who are deans or presidents or who run organizations, and I talk to them a lot about this, is there's one really dangerous thing that happens, which is that you stop having the time to think and to just have time to just, create this space in your mind where you can reflect and think through things and find different options and not just offer a solution immediately. So I'm trying to build that space and that time. And so I'm like, I automated this, reaction, which is, okay, do I really need to solve this right now? Should I wait? Should I just use the subway ride home to think this through? And so I'm trying to do that as much as I can.
And I think that's such a thoughtful approach, because you also, with all the love that you and I have for academia, it's also not necessarily a fast-moving, agile environment, right? No university is. I think everyone who works in academia knows that there are processes and bureaucratic issues, and things take time for various reasons, and sometimes for good reasons, right? But sometimes just because they always took time and they're just, they are used to taking time. So I feel like you also came into this role with a very different, like, your personal pace, right? And your personal pace is very fast and very agile and very forward thinking. How did that adjustment to being in an environment, and I don't necessarily just mean the school, I mean being in, one of the biggest universities in the country. How did you adjust to kind of that pace, that different pace of decision making and processes, and having to have like a very long runway for some, changes that you want to make, and they might take a year or two to actually execute?
So two things. First, in the school, as you know, it is academia, but it's most people are journalists by training. So all of our professors and a lot of our, staff members and team members come from journalism. So they have my same pace, and they are also like, they're always one. So, and I have sometimes to stop and say, wait a minute, this is not a newsroom. We don't need to stay, until 10 p.m. today. Just, we don't need to talk this tonight. This can wait until Monday. Nothing's going to happen. So I find myself reminding my colleagues about this. And I think that gives them also some more.
Yeah.
It creates less anxiety.
Yeah.
Then yes, we are part of CUNY. CUNY is the largest urban university in the world. CUNY is an incredibly important, amazing miracle of an institution. New York wouldn't be New York without it. It's like the largest engine of social mobility and civic engagement in this city, and one of the largest in the country. And so I always remind that when I get annoyed at CUNY's bureaucracy or pace, I say that to me, and I'm like, Graciela, if this didn't exist, it would be such a huge loss.
Yeah.
And so this is a university that has 25 campuses. We are the smallest, and 260,000 students. So, and an incredibly large kind of history and layers and layers of bureaucracy, because it's a state agency. So I'm very strategic. So what I do is like, okay, procurement requires between 2 and 6 months for us to buy something, renew software licenses, buy computers, whatever it is. So I've decided that the approach before has been, or the tendency is to send things, everybody thinks as a journalist on deadlines. So if we need the software next month, we're going to send the request today. And then everybody gets very upset because it takes 2 to 6 months. And what I've done is I've just sit down with all the directors and said, it's going to take 2 to 6 months. Let's budget for that. Let's send the request 2 to 6 months in advance. And guess what? It makes it work.
It makes things less stressful for everyone. Probably also for the folks on the other end of that process who can do nothing about it as well, right? They just have to, they also become frustrated.
Exactly. So I'm trying. So, and sometimes you don't have the time because sometimes something broke down and you need it. And then they work with you. I would just go to the folks at procurement and say, I'm so sorry. Can you please bring this from down the pile, put it on top? I really need this and I explain why, and people help you. But if you work with that, if you put that type of pressure and that urgency on people all the time, it is not sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also speaks to that, and you mentioned that before in other words, you have to somehow pick your fights, right? You cannot create stress in the system all the time for everyone, or people are just going to break and things are going to break and you are going to break, right?
Yes.
You only have so much, you can only give so many urgent things your attention at a time.
Yes, exactly. So, and I think you need to be mindful of that. We are at a moment at the school in which, so my job, I'm the third dean. The school has been around for 17 years. So, I ask myself every day. So, I mean, not every day, but, when I just think, okay, what have I been? It's been 8 months. Let's stop and think. So what have I done? Where are the wins? What are the things that I didn't accomplish yet? And what is the plan for the next, for the rest of the year? And then the next 5 years, where do I want the school to be in 5 years? I do think about these things all the time. And one of the things is like, okay, so am I going too fast? Am I putting too much pressure? And can this be done? Can I just slow down? And what I'm doing now is I'm asking people, and in some cases, there's pushback because people are like, there's too much change. And, we didn't know we thought you were the internal candidate. You're not, or normally the external candidate is the candidate of change. And I this is the change. So this is interesting. So in my listening tour, I listened loud and clear what type of change people wanted at the school. And I'm doing exactly what people wanted. But then when you do it, people realize that change is harder than they thought, or maybe they thought everybody else was going to change, but not them.
Yeah.
I mean, or that. And so I'm at a moment now where I feel like I need to really explain, what has happened in these, 8 months, everything we've accomplished. And this is a collective accomplishment, everything we've done. And we've done a lot. And it's been, the school is having this extraordinary momentum that is, of course, the accumulation of 17 years of work by a lot of people. And we are just so uniquely positioned for this moment in the journalism industry and journalism education. And that is wonderful. But that you need to, I think that's part of your job, right? To remind people why you're doing it. Where is it that you're going? What is the vision? And I feel this is an advice actually you gave me at one point when I was running CCM, which is that sometimes you need to over communicate.
Yeah.
And that over communication, you need to understand when you don't need to, overwhelm people with information, but when you need to repeat things because you need to reassure that, you're going in a direction. So I remember that, and I'm trying to do that now.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And I also try to live up to that, to that motto. And it's sometimes hard because I feel if you're in the doing mode, that it's hard to get into that explanatory mode, right? Because you're so focused on doing and improving things and getting things done and solving problems that sometimes I personally sometimes feel that the explanatory mode where it's more about, explaining again and again why you are doing something. It sometimes feels like a waste of time, which of course it isn't, but it's sometimes so hard if you're in that motion to step out of that motion again, right?
Yes, totally. And and you have to be able to also find the words. There's something sometimes, I've embraced this radical transparency philosophy and approach. And so I feel that's, I'm doing that because I want transparency in my life, professional life, but also because I feel like the ethics of journalism are the same that should guide my, job as a dean. It's a journalism school. It's not any place, it's not about. So I feel like, if our business is to be truth seekers, I can't not offer the truth and bring transparency into the process. Sometimes that's hard because there's so many privacy issues and things that you can't really share because, those are either private or there are legislation that protects that information. It's privileged information. So sometimes, it takes a lot of thought and imagination and creativity to find the words to explain something when you cannot share everything. And I don't want to just say, you need to trust me because, why? That's something you need to earn every day. It's not a given. So that is something I struggle with. Yeah. Sometimes.
And I totally understand. And I think you struggle if you would be a newsroom CEO or general manager or editor-in-chief. I think you'd probably struggle with similar things, right? Because it's the same thing. You have an organization and you try to hold the organization and yourself as a leader to the same standard that you want to hold the profession to. Transparency, radical truth seeking, telling the truth, changing society. But then obviously when it becomes personal, right? And when it influences how you act and behave every day. And when all these, like you said, privacy issues and other things come up, sometimes it's so hard to stick to that path, right?
Yes, it is. But I think, we must.
Yeah. I'd love to know, Graciela, you talk to so many newsroom leaders now. to so many people who are in charge of news organization. And I think that comes with being the dean of one of the great journalism schools in the United States and the world. You basically suddenly have that ear to the ground when it comes to what's going on in newsrooms. What is your perspective on newsroom leadership at the moment? What is changing? What do you see what do you hear when you have those conversations?
So that's one of the perks of the job, that people now they're so happy to just sit down with you, and they make the time, right?
Yeah.
To talk to you. And, I do that because I need to make sure that the education, the training we're offering our students aligns with, the transformations in the industry. So as you know, this is a moment, and it's been for a while, a moment of radical transformation in this industry. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's a very uneven landscape out there. There's huge success and then a lot of uncertainty and failure. And there's a lot of fear, and there's still a lot of very kind of deeply ingrained nostalgia and kind of, sense of, let's preserve, let's save what we had, because it was, this idea that there was these golden days and they're gone and people want them back. And I think that's the wrong approach. And I see that the newsroom leaders that struggled the most are the ones who hung on to that feeling, because it's not coming back. And also it wasn't that great. It didn't serve everybody. There's these myths about, in this country, particularly, and I do approach this from a global perspective, because we know this is not just happening in the US, right? This is happening everywhere in the world.
Totally.
And this is happening at a time in which there's so many other societal changes that actually have a huge impact on this moment in the industry, like political polarization and the rise of authoritarian, figures and inequality. Those things are global. But when I look at those in the US, I also see that the industry here has been shaped by the same myth that American democracy had. So there's this myth that American democracy is so old and stable, when actually there wasn't a full democracy in this country until 1965, when Black people were able to vote in the South. And then the same myth translated into this idea that there was a mainstream media that served every American. And, the sole existence of community and ethnic media serving Black people, Latino people, immigrants, people in other languages, Asian Americans. There's a whole entire industry or several industries serving those communities because mainstream media never served them. So I actually, see that I feel like the news leaders who are probably most likely to succeed are the ones who are looking at all of these things from a perspective of opportunity. And I'm not saying this lightly. I know running a newsroom is such a hard thing to do, and people are just completely overwhelmed by the just trying to figure out how to grow new audiences and get trust from people and pay salaries. And so many outlets, just the past few weeks, 3 outlets have either shut down here in America or laid off so many people. Vice yesterday, BuzzFeed News last week.
Absolutely.
So it's really brutal out there for a lot of people. So I'm very mindful of that. And I'm trying to see how the school can actually, work with these leaders. And it's our alumni losing jobs. So it sucks. But at the same time, I just don't want to lose sight of the opportunity, because at the same time, there's this very interesting new movement, I would say, that is growing and being born with all of these replanting local news efforts and all of these new outlets that are still small, but bring a model that is new and really, I think, exciting about new ways of serving communities and recentering the idea and the social service, the public service, the public service aspect. So, it's really hard to describe it in just one way, isn't it? Because it's just it depends on who you talk to. But in terms of leadership, what I see, the one big struggle that so many leaders are having is the, generational one. So all these, people who are running news organizations, who are, which is also a population that's where there's very little diversity in terms of both, demographics and gender, and also, kind of views of the world. And they just feel like many of those people feel they are kind of at war with their younger reporters, that they need to fight for ideas like, editorial independence and objectivity, the way it's framed here, and that there's an existential war going on there. Do you see that too?
I see that too, and I feel it's quite interesting because it's also such a global phenomenon. At least in the Western societies, there is this like gigantic generational shift. It's not only generational, right? But there are some generational lines that are drawn, where the understanding of what journalism is on one hand, but then also what work should be, and what work-life balance should be, and how work should work for someone. Like both of these things, I feel, are being renegotiated at the same time. So I think that's why it's hitting newsrooms that hard, because it's the profession and it is the general trend of like, what is work and how do I want to shape my work life? And I think it's kind of that double whammy of like, boom, everything is imploding or exploding.
Yes, I think, we've all seen that in the, in the come back to the office efforts. I was a couple of months ago, I was talking to this, this person who runs a very important mainstream organization here. And they were saying, that they were just so pissed because they had these beautiful offices and they were spending so much money, and they were just really, they were gonna force people to come back to the office. And I said, are you really willing to die on that hill? Because you're gonna
lose them.
You're gonna lose. And also, why?
Yeah.
Right?
It is a bit of a cultural issue more than just the office, right? There is more at stake.
Yes, because there's also this lack of trust in people. Like, how do I know they're working if I don't see them? Well, you'll see the results. I don't know. I can see them, and they might not be working anyway if they're at the office. So how is that evidence of anything? So at the school, what we decided is, for staff members and, the people who have to come to the office, we've had since we started coming back a 50-50 rule. So like you're home half of the time, at the office half of the time. So I've extended that policy. And every time I communicate that in emails that you've received, I always say, please be mindful that this is a privilege, and that some people here, like our custodians, our public safety people, they don't have the luxury of choosing this. So this is something I think it's good for us, but it is a privilege.
Yeah.
And I think
absolutely,
it's also my job to remind people of that.
Absolutely. Makes a ton of sense. As you are thinking about, as you're seeing how our alumni, the school's alumni who do the master's degrees, enter the workforce, enter newsrooms, start to make their way in journalism. One thing that we saw 5 years ago when I, with colleagues, started the leadership program, the executive program at this school that's still thriving and has now been taken over by the wonderful Nikita Patel. Part of the reason why we did that is because we saw that those master's degree students entering the workforce came from this incredibly diverse school that puts so much emphasis on innovation and transformation and centering communities, but then suddenly they enter this workforce where newsrooms don't center those communities, don't center equity, don't put that huge emphasis on innovation and transformation and change. So they had these frustrations, and we said, well, we need to train leaders as well and retrain leaders as well if we want to change that. Do you think, like 5 years later, obviously we can, change the world, but what do you see now as you see those young students enter the workforce? Do you feel things are changing? Are newsrooms fundamentally changing in their culture? Is it getting better?
I think, again, it depends on where. I think it's not in many organizations, and it is in other organizations. And there's new organizations that are being born with that approach as part of their, foundational DNA. So what I see is that what I think, that makes our alumni so competitive is that they have a broader understanding of what the media industry is and what the options are. We do have a lot of them who are actually the new entrepreneurs. We do have also, as you know, a very, very, very interesting and successful entrepreneurial training program. I see that, a lot of the alumni of the News Leadership program are leaders already, and a lot of them are people of color and women, and they are waging their own battles, trying to change their organizations. It's very uneven. I don't know that you can say. So if you look at the available diversity numbers for mainstream media, which are tricky because most outlets are not transparent with that data. So the data is very, very limited, and it looks as bad as it did 50 years ago. I mean, even, or worse. I mean. And we all know that in mainstream traditional legacy media, there's the glass ceiling that women and people of color hit the fastest. So that's why the approach for us, for the school, has been, of course, since before my time as the dean, has been to look at the industry as a whole. And so move beyond just training reporters, which is what journalism schools have done for 100 years, and train for all of these different tiers and levels in the industry, because the reporters are the ones with the less power, right? So it's harder for them to change the industry. But if you tackle the top and the middle, and we are now trying to launch another training program for editors and managers, mid-level managers in the newsrooms. And I'm very excited about that. I'm very hopeful that will bring the change. I think there's also change coming from just the generational pressure on and the audience pressure on the industry. So there's kind of a very loud and clear demand for newsroom culture to change, and also for newsrooms to start serving audiences in a better way. And that pressure, everyone is feeling that. So even for those who resist the change, they are kind of running out of options. They don't. And also you get just roasted if you don't really criticize, if you're not aware of these things. So I see more and more outlets, of course, the ones that are the wealthier, because the wealth disparity in the industry is just, as bad as in the world. But I see a lot of outlets investing in their own professional development, creating new pipelines, investing and training, people that in the past were completely overlooked. So I do see a lot of change. I don't agree with this view that nothing has changed. I think there's so much change, and even people who are clueless about how to bring change about, they want to know how.
Yeah, totally. And I think you're so right. There is like this, it helps that there are some broader societal, generational, like tectonic movements happening, right? It does help. It does help that it's not just, us, the little J-School, or, one editor in the newsroom trying to change things. It helps that the world is changing as well. How much of that change weight, how should I put that, do you feel on your shoulders? You're the first Latina in this role. You're an immigrant to the U.S. You originally come from Argentina. how much of that weight of like, I have to succeed because I'm here for all women, all Latinas, all Argentinians, all immigrants to the U.S. How much of that do you carry on your shoulders?
One of the great things about this job, and I'm very, very honest now saying this, is that it is not about me at all.
Yeah.
And that has been to me as a writer and a reporter for like 30 years, almost 30 years. That has been I feel it as a huge relief that it is not about me. It is not about me finding, just how well the book is written or the story or how, that was kind of, I felt that pressure when it was just of course it was about, the people I was writing about, and I was always respectful of that. But, I felt the pressure that I had to do, and I still write, so I do feel that there, like, I have this column about Latino issues for the New Yorker, and I feel that type of pressure there. I'm like, there haven't been that many Latino columnists in that magazine, which is such an amazing institution. So I feel like if I mess up, I'm hurting other people who really deserve that chance too. But I don't feel that at the school. And I think also I don't feel like that because the school, I'm not the only person who's a Latina in this school. Yeah. This school, like everybody's like us, it's a very, when you go into the building in our school and you are in our classrooms and newsrooms, it looks like New York the same way. Yeah. So you're outside in Times Square.
And it looks like inside. The world, right? It looks like the world, but really like the world. Yeah.
So you can't say that about a lot of other J-schools or newsrooms. Yeah. So I'm not different from anyone else there.
And I think that is really such a smart piece of perspective, because I think that is true. I think what makes it particularly stressful is if you're the only woman in the management team, the only person of color, the only immigrant. And if you're constantly basically, selected out as like, oh, you're going to solve that issue for us because you are the other in the room. And if that doesn't feel like it, it takes a lot of that, and not a lot of that, but part of that weight, that extra weight that women and people of color and immigrants have to carry, at least from your shoulders.
Yes, and we are a majority women and people of color at the school. So yes, so everybody, we don't need to be translating, our experience to people. We don't need to be, it's a given, right?
Yeah. Thinking about the future, however long you're going to be the dean of this school, what do you want your legacy to be at this school? What do you want folks to say in 10 or 15 years about you, about the impact you had on the school, but also on the industry, broadly speaking?
The way I think about it for myself is like, what do I want the school to be in 5 years, 10 years from now? I want the school, I want it to still be around. And I hope the news industry will see, I'm kind of joking, but, I want the school to be it is already one of the top J schools in the country, but I want it to remain and be, the top journalism school in the country. I want it to still be, to always be the school that really, not only follows the transformation in the industry, but also can see it coming before it happens. So I want us to be, I want the school to still be the most creative, imaginative, and I want the school to, and this is part of my daily work now, is I want the school to also be the place where change is embraced and where there's enthusiasm about it. I'll give you an example. We know with all of this conversation about AI and how the coverage of AI and journalism skews towards, well, this could lead to our extinction, right? And this is dangerous. And and that might be the case. I'm not saying it's not, but I want us, what we're doing is we're now preparing programming to actually get our students and our faculty to experiment with AI and see, because it's not going away, and see how actually we can use it for the best, for good. And so I hope in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, the school is a place in which everybody knows, that makes everyone very enthusiastic, and where people want to be there because they would know that there's always something very interesting happening there. And I want of course, the industry to know and to really, embrace and believe that the idea and believe that our graduates, if they hire our graduates and our alumni, they are the ones who are going to, they're the best prepared to be reporters and editors and news leaders. And I hope that's already the case. I met a news leader yesterday in a dinner, and she said, we've hired so many, Newmark alumni, and every time I have someone from any other school and a CUNY Newmark alum, I just know the CUNY one's going to be better. So I hired that. So I hope, our job is to get our students jobs. So, the main bottom line is they will still be the better prepared for the jobs as they exist.
And I think it's also, Graciela, I think why I like that approach is also it kind of exemplifies and explains that change is a constant, right?
Exactly.
Change is not something that's going to end in 3 months, in 6 months, in 12 months. Sometimes, hopefully for the media industry, there will be quieter times a little bit because now they are very turbulent with also the economic disruption. But change is a constant, and preparing students to face that constant and actively engage with it and productively engage with it, I think is a very smart approach to think about education.
Yes, the way we say it is that we're training agents of change, and I really believe that. I feel that has been my training as a reporter in Argentina at a time where we were just recently come out of a dictatorship. It was like a new world where people were not, detained for practicing journalism. And there was this freedom and at the same time very corrupt governments and a democracy that was really messy, as democracy always is. And that creates a specific type of people, right? Like resilient, but also very, very flexible for adaptation. And I feel journalists need that, and also need to really still be very, very connected to society and understand how to serve the public.
We're nearly at the end, so I'd love to throw that last question at you. If you could go back in time to young Graciela and tell her something about leadership and something about careers and something about finding your leadership mission, what is something you'd tell your younger self?
I would say, I never thought, this was not my dream, if I can say this. My dream when I was a young reporter was to be the best political columnist in my country. And if you had told me when I was 25 or 30 that I was going to be the dean of a J-school, I would have thought that you're drunk. And also, who wants that? That was not what I wanted.
It's not a 25-year-old dream. No?
I just wanted to be, I remember walking in Buenos Aires and looking at people. I was already in my late 20s and looking at people, kind of going just about their lives and looking at them and trying to guess what they were. Like that one is an accountant, that one is probably a lawyer, and feeling so sorry for them because they weren't journalists. I felt, poor people, I have the best job in the world, and these people have these boring lives and this boring. So I've always loved this job, and I still do, and that's why I still write. But I would say just be open-minded and be careful with the plans you make, because they might change, and be ready to be surprised, and just prepare for whatever is coming, because you don't know.
I love that, and wonderful advice. And Graciela, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This was today's episode of Better Leaders. If you enjoyed it, please do follow us and subscribe. Thanks for listening.
Missing link.